We'll jump right in. This one's short but important. The coaches didn't sugarcoat it. Special teams, specifically kickoff coverage, has been a real problem, and Brian Schottenheimer said they're considering personnel adjustments to fix it. That's not coach speak for "we're fine." It's the kind of line you hear when a unit is costing you field position and, ultimately, points. If you want more boots-on-the-ground Cowboys breakdowns, subscribe and help push this channel to our goal of $17,000. Subs. We're building this community, and your sub actually makes a difference. Now, here's the headline. Kickoff coverage has been giving opponents far too friendly starting spots, and Schottenheimer was blunt about what's wrong. Losing contain, players leaving lanes, and not keeping the arm free necessary to funnel returners. He said they have to get that fixed and that personnel changes are on the table, which means we should expect the staff to tinker with who's on the hands and knees. Run down units this week. I want you to think about the last time a kickoff return put an opponent on your side of the field with short yardage to the end zone. That's the kind of momentum swing Schottenheimer wants to stop immediately. Quick question for you. Right now, in the comments, vote. Do you trust the coaches to fix special teams on their own? Or do you want Jerry to step in and force a move? Say, coach or owner, and then one sentence, why? I'll read the best answers in the next video. Before we get into who's at risk and what a possible swap looks like, understand this. When your kickoff coverage is handing over the fourth most or so return yards in the league, it isn't some minor annoyance. It's creating easier scoring chances for opponents, and the coaching staff is treating it as urgent. That means in live games we could see different players sent out on coverage, or in practice the coaches might change splits, alignment, or even kickoff strategy to buy time while they evaluate personnel. So keep an eye on the very next game's kickoff unit. If you see different numbers on the tape, that's not random. And don't forget to like the video if you're getting good information, and subscribe to help push us toward 17,000. It really helps get this channel more coverage and keeps this insider-style content coming. Okay, when you're ready, I'll get into the numbers that explain why Schottenheimer sounded so decisive. From here, let's break down exactly how bad the kickoff coverage has been, because it's one thing for a coach to say, we need to fix it, and it's another to understand the real impact it's having on games. When a team consistently loses the hidden yardage battle, you can't just point to the defense or the offense and say they need to score more or stop more. It starts with the field position you hand your opponent before the first snap of a drive, and lately the Cowboys have been gifting teams starting points that a playoff-caliber roster simply can't afford to give. The numbers paint a clear picture. Opponents have been ripping off big return after big return, enough that Dallas now sits near the bottom of the league in kickoff coverage performance. That isn't an exaggeration. It's part of why the staff is openly talking about personnel changes instead of sticking with the status quo. Think about the Detroit game, because that was the example that really put this issue in the spotlight. 8 returns for over 260 yards is not something you see from a disciplined special teams unit. That's the kind of stat line you get when coverage lanes collapse. Contain is lost and tacklers aren't making clean contact early in the return. And every time Detroit brought the ball back past the 30, the defense had to defend a shortened field. It's tough for any playoff contender to survive those constant body blows. A unit built to rush the passer and disrupt timing simply plays differently when the opposing offense only needs to go 50 yards instead of 75. Suddenly, your pass rush has less room to influence the quarterback, the opponent can keep their entire playbook available, and your defense has to play tighter and more reactive. This is why Schottenheimer wasn't willing to brush off the issue in his presser. He knows these returns aren't just stats. They're making the season harder than it needs to be. Here's something I want you to think about, and I'd love your answer in the comments. What do you think is the biggest problem here? Is it alignment, tackling, or discipline in lane integrity? Pick one, tell me why, and drop a quick example of a play that comes to mind. I'm curious because fans see things coaches sometimes overlook, especially when you've watched this unit every week. Another piece to consider is how this affects momentum. When your kickoff coverage gives up a 40-yard return, the sideline feels it. The defense has to jog out again knowing it's already fighting uphill, and the offense loses the chance to control tempo because it might not touch the ball for another 4 or 5 minutes. It becomes a ripple effect. Poor coverage leads to short fields, which leads to quicker opponent scoring drives, which leads to your own offense getting fewer opportunities and feeling more pressure. And this is why field position is one of the most underrated aspects of the modern NFL. Teams are built so precisely now that even a 5-yard difference on starting field position changes the flow of entire drives. The Cowboys know this. That's why you're hearing urgency from the coaching staff. They can't afford to let special teams be the weak link that undermines the talent they have everywhere else. Before I move to personnel changes in the next chapter, here's a quick yes or no vote for you. Do you believe Dallas should consider calling up practice squad players strictly for special teams help, even if it means reducing snaps for a more well-known backup? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to see where real fans stand on this, because it tells you how this community views accountability inside the building. And as always, if you appreciate this level of breakdown, make sure you're subscribed. We're pushing hard to get this channel to 17,000 subscribers, and every single sub helps this content reach more Cowboys fans who want honest, detailed analysis. Hit the like button too. It truly helps more than people realize. Now that we've laid out exactly how the kickoff coverage has been hurting this team, let's get into what everyone really wants to know. Who might be affected if the Cowboys actually follow through with the personnel adjustments Brian Schottenheimer hinted at? When a coach publicly acknowledges potential changes, it usually means those conversations have already been happening behind the scenes. And when he specifically ties the issues to discipline, contain, and lane integrity, that tells you these aren't scheme problems as much as they are execution problems. Execution problems almost always point to personnel. The first group that gets looked at in situations like this is the depth players, the guys whose primary value on game day is special teams. That means backup defensive backs, backup linebackers, and even some of the wide receivers or running backs who fill out the bottom third of the roster. Coaches love consistency on special teams more than anywhere else because those plays are chaotic by nature. If one player is late, getting downfield, or gets washed out of his lane, the whole coverage collapses like a domino. And based on the way Schottenheimer described the breakdowns, you can bet the staff is pulling up the film frame by frame, identifying who lost leverage, who got sealed inside, and who didn't keep the arm free. Those names will be the first on the list when they talk about swapping personnel. Another angle here is the practice squad conversation. This is where things sometimes get interesting. When the main roster players are struggling to maintain their assignments, coaches don't hesitate to look at the hungry players on the practice squad who can run, tackle, and stay disciplined. It's not unusual for a practice squad linebacker or safety to suddenly get elevated just to provide a spark on special teams. And based on how urgent the coaches sounded, I would not be surprised if we see at least one call-up specifically for coverage duties. That's often the cleanest way to send a message without shaking the entire depth chart. But there's another layer that fans sometimes overlook: veterans. Coaches don't like calling out veterans publicly, but if a veteran special teamer is blowing contain or consistently losing one-on-one battles on kickoff coverage, his snaps can get reduced too. Sometimes the change isn't a dramatic benching, it's a subtle rotation shift. Maybe a guy who played 8 reps on special teams last week only gets 4 this week. Maybe someone who hasn't been on kickoff coverage in a month suddenly gets inserted back in. Coaches love doing things quietly to avoid questions, but fans who watch closely will spot the differences. Let me ask you directly, if you had to choose, would you rather see a rookie with raw talent get the shot, or would you stick with the veteran who knows the system but isn't producing? Drop rookie or veteran in the comments and tell me why. I think this fan base is divided on that question, and I'm curious where you land. As for positions, the most likely spots to see turnover are the back-end defensive backs and the depth linebackers. These are the players who traditionally fill lanes on kickoff coverage because they have the best combination of speed and tackling ability. If a safety or linebacker hasn't been finishing plays, that's the first place coaches look when they think about tightening up special teams. Wide receivers who aren't contributing on offense but are expected to help on coverage could also see their roles adjusted. In situations like this, the staff will evaluate not only who's making mistakes, but who's giving good effort, tracking properly, and playing with the right leverage. A roster move is not always about punishment. Sometimes it's just about finding the right blend of speed, discipline, and aggression. Before I close this chapter, here's a quick challenge for you in the comments. Name one practice squad player or depth guy you'd like to see elevated or given a crack at kickoff. Coverage. It doesn't have to be realistic. I just want to know who you believe could bring energy to this unit. And make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. We're pushing toward 17,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps this channel grow. Hit the like button too. It tells YouTube that Cowboys fans want more content like this. At this point, it's important to separate what the Cowboys can fix right now from what demands a deeper, long-term strategy. Because when Brian Schottenheimer talks about evaluating personnel and making necessary adjustments, he's not just referring to next week's kickoff coverage. He's pointing to something bigger, the identity of this special teams unit, and whether the current mix of players fits the vision the staff wants going forward. Short-term fixes are useful. They can patch holes, plug in a faster body, or bench someone who keeps losing leverage. But long-term solutions are built around consistency, development, and roster philosophy. And that's where things get really interesting. For the short term, the solutions are fairly straightforward. If someone is blowing contain, you replace him with someone who won't. If a lane is consistently opening up on one side of the formation, you shift the alignments or move the personnel around. If your kickoff specialist is putting too much pressure on the coverage team with low, returnable kicks, you reevaluate placement. These are adjustments the staff can make immediately. They don't require a full system overhaul or a shift in coaching philosophy. They just require accountability and urgency. And based on Schottenheimer's comments, it sounds like they finally have both. But when you look at the long-term picture, the conversation expands. This is where you start asking whether the current roster construction actually supports high-level special teams play. The Cowboys have always relied heavily on their depth pieces to carry special teams, but the question now is whether that depth is built the right way. Are the bottom of the roster players athletic enough? Are they physical enough? Are they disciplined enough to survive the chaos of kickoff and punt coverage? Those qualities matter more than people think. It's not just about being fast. It's about maintaining control while running full speed into traffic. And this is where the off-season decisions come into play. The players that fill out the final spots on the 53-man roster often determine the quality of your special teams. If Dallas wants to elevate their coverage units long-term, they'll need to prioritize that in free agency and the draft. That means targeting players who not only provide depth at their positions, but also bring value as reliable, high-motor special teamers. The best teams in the league treat special teams as a core function, not an afterthought. And right now, Schottenheimer's comments suggest the Cowboys are finally acknowledging that this phase needs more resources and more intentional planning. Let me ask you something that ties directly into this bigger picture. If it meant improving special teams significantly next season, would you be okay with the Cowboys using a mid-round draft pick on a player who's primarily a special teams standout? I know opinions vary on that. Some fans think every pick needs to be a future starter. Others believe special teams is worth the investment. Drop your answer in the comments and tell me your reasoning. Another long-term factor is coaching philosophy. John Fassel is known for being aggressive and creative, But creative units only work when the fundamentals are sound. You can't dial up wrinkles if the basics aren't being executed. That's why this moment feels so pivotal. It's not just about fixing one rough stretch, it's about resetting expectations. If the Cowboys want to be a complete team, special teams can't lag behind the offense and defense. They need a unit that flips field position, steals possessions, and keeps opponents pinned deep. That requires players who buy into the system and coaches who hold them to the highest standard. Before we roll into the final chapter, here's a quick interaction for you. What's the one thing you believe the Cowboys absolutely must change to build a reliable special teams identity going forward? Is it personnel, coaching, prioritizing certain traits in roster construction? Let me know in the comments, because this is a debate that goes far beyond this week's adjustments. And as always, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a perfect time. We're pushing hard toward our 17,000 subscriber goal, and your support genuinely makes a difference. Hit that like button as well. It helps the channel reach more Cowboys fans who want honest, detailed breakdowns like this. So now that we've gone through the problems, the personnel, and the short and long-term outlook, it's time to bring this all together and talk about what these changes really mean for the Cowboys moving forward. Because if there's one thing that stood out in Brian Schottenheimer's comments, it's that this team knows it can't afford to have a weak link right now. Every phase matters, especially when you expect to be playing deep into the postseason. And for the Cowboys, special teams isn't just a footnote. It's a phase that can swing momentum, dictate field position, and completely change the complexion of a game in a single play. This is why Schottenheimer's urgency should be taken seriously. When a coach goes public with comments about execution, discipline, and personnel evaluation, that's a sign that frustration has reached a point where internal conversations aren't enough. It means issues have lingered. It means results haven't matched expectations. And most importantly, it means they're ready to act. You can fix scheme with meetings. You fix discipline with accountability. And accountability almost always shows up in the form of snap reductions, roster, shakeups, or role changes. That's what makes this moment so important. The Cowboys are signaling that as the season tightens, they're done waiting for improvement. They're looking to force it. But here's the part fans sometimes overlook. This could turn into a positive. When a team takes special teams seriously, it sends a message through the entire locker room. It tells players that every snap matters. It tells the depth guys that effort and consistency will be rewarded. And it tells the veterans that performance matters more than name recognition when the margins get thin. Those messages can change how a team practices, how it approaches situational football, and how it prepares for physical games down the stretch. If the Cowboys can clean up kickoff coverage and stabilize their personnel, it suddenly makes life easier on the defense. It opens up more aggressive play calling. It sets the offense up with better opportunities. And those small improvements can become the difference between grinding through games and actually dictating pace. This team has the talent. What they're hunting now is the completeness, becoming the kind of team that wins all the little battles. The ones that don't show up on highlight reels but absolutely show up in the final score. Before we close, let me ask you one more thing, and I'd love to hear it in the comments. Do you believe these special teams adjustments, if executed correctly, can actually become an advantage for Dallas? Not just something they fix, but something they use to tilt games? Drop your honest take, yes or no, and tell me why. I want to know where your confidence level is. And as always, if you've been enjoying this breakdown, take a second to subscribe. We're pushing toward that 17,000 subscriber goal, and your support genuinely drives this channel forward. Hit the like button so this video reaches more Cowboys fans who want real analysis instead of surface-level noise.